Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CDL podcast. This is going to be the post-New York show, as you guys all know. What a tournament we had with some of the crazy results. Obviously, with a tournament with Atlanta and Chicago in it, based on how this year has gone, you'd expect one of those two teams to probably win it. But obviously, if you guys watch the tournament at all, you know that didn't happen. But before we get into anything, just like always, it seems like I really need to thank you guys. Like I always have to do. I'm so grateful for the support you show. Our last video gained us a bunch of new subs, like 10 new subs or something like that. But more importantly, we set our comment record. We had like 40 comments, just talking some Call of Duty. We shattered our view record, which used to be like 400 something, with over 600 views, like 640 views. I just want to thank you guys so much for the support. It's crazy to me to have so many people who enjoyed the videos enough to continue to tune in every weekend, continue to have the numbers go up. This is obviously like a passion project for me, something I do on the side of being busy with the job and college and everything, and working for the college COD League. So it's a lot on my plate. In terms of doing this podcast is like an extra thing that consumes some time, but I just love doing it so much that to me, it's more of an enjoyment rather than an extra piece of work. So I just want to thank you guys so much for the continued support. Just seeing the numbers of comments and likes and subscribers and views and everything goes up really just keeps motivating me and shows me that, like, hey, there's actually people that are interested to listen to this and like listening to this and like being a part of this community. So it's really cool to me to see that. So obviously I really appreciate that. And I just want to thank you guys so much for that support. And also, before we get started, I'd really appreciate if you guys kept that up. If you sub, if you aren't, and you watch the podcast consistently, and you sub or you aren't subbed, it'd be nice if you did sub, because that can help grow our community even bigger, and we can have even bigger conversations and possibly start that Discord I talked about, as well as comment your thoughts on any video I do, especially like these podcast ones. I do some like special here and there videos with like my favorite CODs and stuff. But comment your thoughts on my takes from this video. I'm going to offer some kind of hot takes and my power rankings and stuff. So comment what you guys think. Are my power rankings wrong? Would you switch it around here and there? Obviously, they're not some definitive power ranking. I'm not 100% right. So you guys may have a different thought on it. Then we can have conversations about the weekends. And then also, lastly, before we get into everything, I wanted to know, should I start a Twitter account for this podcast specifically? Obviously, I already have like a personal Twitter that I kind of like follow friends and Call of Duty stuff mostly. But I'm wondering, should I start like a CDL podcast Twitter, so it'd be an easier form? Because like during the matches this weekend, a couple of you that commented on the last video were commenting like, hey, my predictions were really good, and like, wow, I can't believe I predicted this. And one guy was like, yeah, I said I thought Dallas was going to do this like really good this weekend, and then he called himself an idiot because he's like, I didn't even realize Dallas wasn't playing. But it's a lot harder for me. Like every once in a while, I'll check like my YouTube Studio app and like see if there's any new comments so I can comment back to people and have that conversation. But sometimes it's really hard to notice, and because they don't, I mean, if you've ever been in that app, they don't pop up very easily. So sometimes I might miss a comment for a couple days because it like doesn't give me notification. It's really hard to find. So if I started a Twitter, maybe like if you wanted to, like, we could live tweet back and forth like during matches, like, oh my god, this player did this, or like this upset happened, or like, hey, I predicted this, and like I commented on your YouTube video. So maybe just to have a little bit more interactions. Then you guys could also like send me questions and stuff that I could maybe add to the podcast. So should I start a Twitter account for the podcast? I probably will, and maybe I'll even do it while I'm uploading the video or something. I can put the link in the description or something like that. But let me know if that's something, like comment down below if you'd want to see that. I think that'd be something. I mean, it's not hard to create a Twitter account. It'd be kind of cool to have live interaction with you guys that way. So now that all those little updates are done, we're going to start with, as you guys should see on the screen, I'm going to put the points leaderboard up on the screen following CDL New York. And as you can see here on this leaderboard, we've got Faze in first with 250, then the Huntsmen with 220, Florida with 200, Empire with 190, Subliners with 130, Roker with 120, Royal Ravens with 100, and then Optic, Legion, and Ultra all at 70, and then Guerrillas and Surge at 50. So looking at these standings, I believe on the broadcast at the end when Maven and MerK were talking, kind of giving their analysis on the weekend, I believe that they said that the top four are locked in place. I don't think... That must mean that the Subliners aren't playing in the last two events, because technically if they could, if Empire didn't win another match and Subliners won another tournament and then won two more matches in another one, they'd be at 200 because that'd be plus 70, so they would be ahead of Empire. So they must not be playing in two more events. So it looks like then the top four are locked in. So like Faze, Huntsmen, Mutineers, and Empire are going to be the top four no matter what. Obviously, they can still shift around. I think Empire should be able to take first technically if they were to like win an event or like go back to back or something, because I think they're all going to get to 9 events played, I believe it is, because I think there's 2 more left, so they're going to get to 9 events played in total, everybody. So those teams with 7 events played, Optic, Surge, Empire, and Mutineers are going to be in the last 2, and then all the other ones are going to be only in one of the last 2, I think is how it works. But that top 4 is locked up. I think Faze will probably stay in the 1 spot just due to the lead that they have. But if Florida ends up coming out and winning this event with them having 2 left and Faze only having 1, then it could get really interesting because I don't think Faze plays at the next event. Maybe they do. But if Florida wins it and Faze isn't playing, then they'd be tied at 250 going into that final event. And if they're both there, that could be crazy. But then I believe they also said on broadcast that 5 through 8 is kind of like all up for grabs. Now, obviously, I don't think that Subliners or Minnesota are going to get knocked out of that top 8 because, I mean, Subliners is 60 points ahead of the 8th place team. So I don't think that any of those teams are going to win an event to pass them. Maybe Optic is like the only team with some potential to do it. And then Rocker are 50 points ahead of 8th place and below. And I don't see any of those teams like winning an event and then winning a bunch more. And I can also see Minnesota winning maybe a match or 2 at their last event to gain a couple more points. I don't see Minnesota dropping out of the top 8. I'd be shocked if they do because, like I said, that requiring an event win from like Optic or Paris or Ultra, and I don't see that really happening. Or I would probably require an event win from both of them or 2 of them, to be honest, and I don't see that happening at all. And then London, I feel like, is decently safe, being 30 points ahead of the others. I think London will stay in the top 8. They may fall to 8 if Optic is able to pass them with 2 events remaining. But since Legion and Ultra only have 1 event, I don't really see them passing London. I think London will be safe. And then that top 8 spot, that 8th spot, I mean, for me, I think I see Ultra and Optic fighting for it. I don't think Paris. I just don't have much faith in Paris. I don't think they're going to gain too many more points. There's only 1 event left. I'd have to give the edge to Optic because they do have 2 events left, although they do have a new team and who knows how good they're going to be. Just the fact that they are tied with Optic having 2 events left to play and Ultra only having 1, I'll give the advantage to Optic, and then Ultra will probably finish in like 9th or whatever. Maybe a dark horse team out of Paris, Gorillas, and Surge towards the bottom then. I think my dark horse team to maybe sneak into the top 8 somehow would actually be Surge. New meta, we haven't seen them in. I think maybe Pander with an AR in his hand full time, and then I don't even know who their other AR would be. I think they'd keep Proto and Apathy on sub, so maybe like Slacked would take out the 3rd AR. I think that they're a team that has more potential than the Gorillas at this point in Paris, especially when you got a player like Octane, Slacked, Apathy. You always have a chance to take that 8th spot, and also they're the only team between those 3 with 2 events left. So that obviously gives them, they have more chances to win matches. So I think, yeah, the top 4 is locked in. I think that the top 8 is actually going to stay Subliners, Rocker, Royal Ravens, and Optic. And then I think like Ultra and Surge have an outside chance to maybe make it in from there. So now that we talked about the points a little bit, we're going to get into the matches right away. My predictions from the last episode weren't horrible. I didn't predict like the winner and loser portion of who's going to get out of the groups correctly because I predicted Faze to be the winner out of that group. So I got the Group A order wrong, but I got all 4 semifinal teams right. I did have, who is it? I had Faze coming out as the winner of Group A, and then Ultra as like the losing team from the knockout match in Group A, and then I did get Group B 100% right. I don't think I got like map counts right exactly, but I did say Chicago over London, New York over Rocker, then London over Rocker, and all that. So I did actually get Group B completely perfect, not map count wise, but match prediction wise. Got the semifinals right, then obviously my 2 finals teams played each other in the semifinals, so my final couldn't happen. And then I obviously didn't get the winner right because I picked Atlanta, I believe. So let's just go over the matches individually. Obviously, if there was a match that really wasn't that interesting, we won't talk all that much about it. We'll go in more in detail on probably like the semifinal matches and stuff. But we'll start up in the top of the bracket in Group A. We had the Paris Legion versus the Toronto Ultra, and probably on the video I'll try to, for this portion that I talk about the bracket, I think I'm going to start trying to like edit in the bracket just so you guys can see and go along with as I'm talking about it. So hopefully that's in this video, as long as I remember to do that while I'm going through and cutting it up a little bit. So hopefully you guys are able to see that and let me know if I do put that in there, if you do like that. But yeah, starting on the top here, Group A, Ultra, Paris. Ultra were able to handle this one. I didn't get to see the beginning of this match because I was actually working a little bit this weekend and stuff during it. So I didn't get to see like the exact beginning of the match, but I saw like the second, I think I saw like maps 3 and 4, and then I watched the rest of the weekend. And Ultra handled them decently easy, like I would expect. Ultra, I would say, are a better team than Paris, and they were able to take them out 3-1. And then in the Faze Gorillas match, this was kind of just a handling again. Faze just kind of handled them 3-1. A little bit less competitive than I expected. I think in my predictions, I made this one a 3-2 game because, I mean, coming off their last performance that we saw them at, the Gorillas seemed like they turned a new leaf and they were a pretty good team. They seemed like a team that was dominant in search and destroy and had enough firepower now with Saints to compete in respawns. So if they were able to steal a respawn, you felt like they had a really good chance to win the series, because stealing a respawn gets you an extra map, and then if you win that S&D also, then you have 2 map wins and you're at least forced into game 5. And being such a dominant search team, you figure that they could win 2 searches a series, kind of like an old Elevate team from BO3, and get it done. But unfortunately here, they were kind of just manhandled by Faze 3-1. Then in that knockout match, we had Paris, LA Gorillas, and I believe that's how I had it in my predictions. So up to this point, I was right, but I did not see Paris winning this. I figured, LA Gorillas coming off that last event, they looked real good. They'll make it at least a match win here. And I actually was going to pick them to go all the way to the semifinals, so I'm glad I went Ultra. But Paris smoked them 3-0. It was quick. Kind of a letdown for me from the LA Gorillas. I jumped them up my power rankings to 7, I think, in the last one, and I was like, all right, they're here. They're such a good search team that I can see them doing anything. They could be really good again. And then all of a sudden, they just laid an egg. It was tough to see. Paris wins 3-0 though. But while it is tough to see LA Gorillas struggle, it's kind of good to see Paris get a win. They showed a little bit of life winning a map against Ultra, and then they're able to 3-0 the Gorillas, who are a team that you would think is more towards their level. So it's good to see them get a dominate win in that fashion, and good to see them actually compete finally, as they really haven't done that in a while. It was also big for them to get a win because that tied them for 8th place, and obviously, everybody makes champs, so you might as well try to get that 8th place spot, because if you do, you get to start in winners and you give yourself a cushion. So good for Paris to get a win. I like to see that. I like a lot of the players in that team. I've always been a big Dens fan. Kismet seems like he's a good young player that could have a bright future in the league, so good to see them get a win here. And then in the qualifier match, in the winners portion of this bracket, it was Ultra versus Faze. I believe I did have Faze winning this one 3-2 in a close match. And obviously it did go 3-2, but Ultra won it. So also really good to see Ultra. That's not shocking to me really, because especially with Kleenex, Classic, Bance, Methods, that whole team, they have enough talent that I feel like they can compete with any team in respawns. And once again, another really good search team. I feel like they might get the best search and destroy practice in the league, seeing as they have a 10-man roster, so they can take their 5-man bench roster and actually play search and maybe use legitimate strategies. Because I know I hear a lot of pros say a lot of times if they practice search, it's not really good practice, because they don't want to showcase their best strats, so that way the other team knows what they do and may take them, and then other teams have information on them. But this way, if you're playing all 5 of your teammates, I would hope that your teammates aren't snitching to other teams and saying what you do in search, so you may actually get the best practice to see what works and what doesn't. And if you don't tell your B team about your strats, you can actually try them and see how well they work, because they have players like Looney and Brack and now Metals and guys like that in their bench. These are guys that, especially Looney, have been extremely successful in Call of Duty. Brack was good last year. Metals was pretty good on Heretics. Looney seems to win a tournament in every title, besides obviously this year and the past year. So they get probably the best search practice, and I think that helped them a lot here. Obviously, they win that game 5. Faze didn't look horrible in this series, but once again, these slower starts from Faze and them looking vulnerable early in the year, they never looked vulnerable. But it was good to see Toronto get this win, and it was a huge win for Toronto, because although they lose in their next match, they do gain 20 points, which is probably more than some people thought they would, being in Faze's group and with Gorilla's improvement. And gaining 20 points puts them in that tie for 8th, and that's big for them, because I think they're a team that has dark horse potential to maybe make a top 6 or top 4 at champs. So if they can get into that 8th spot, that'd be massive for them. And then in the knockout match in Group A, we had Faze versus Legion. Not much to talk about here. It was a 3-0, like you'd expect. Paris, good for them to win a match this tournament, as we haven't seen them do in a while. Good to show a sign of improvement. Luca looked a lot more comfortable now that he was on the AR, and Dens could also be on the AR. So some signs of life from Paris. They aren't like that complete team that I just think can't beat anybody. If they play teams like Gorillas and like Toronto and like more bottom of the barrel teams, I feel like they can compete a little bit more now because this meta does seem to suit them a little better. So good for them, but Faze beats them 3-0. So then Ultra advanced as the winner out of that group and Faze as the loser. And then in Group B, we had Ravens, Huntsmen. Huntsmen handled them pretty easily, honestly. It was a 3-1. I expected it to be like a 3-1 or 3-2, especially with the nature that Huntsmen seemed to start slow. And the fact that I feel like at this point, for the Ravens, it's in their head that they can't beat these top teams. I know, like with top players like Wuskin, Scrapstill, and all those guys that they have, you're always going to believe that you can beat any top team. But all I ever see them talking about after they lose a tournament is how they got so unlucky and they lost. Oh, guess what? We lost to Empire or Florida or Chicago or Faze again, which, yeah, that is unfortunate. But at this point, since they continue to always lose to those people in the first round of the tournament, I feel like it's just in their head and it's like a hump that they can't get over right now. So until they do, it's just, I don't think I'm ever going to pick them to get over like a top team until I finally see them do it, because I think it's like a mental hurdle for them at this point. And then in that second match there, Subliners, Rocker. Subliners win at 3-1. No shock there. Subliners look like a very good team over the last few weeks, and Rocker has continually struggled over the last few weeks. So pretty simple match there. Subliners win at 3-1, and they looked very good in this match. And then in the knockout match, Ravens, Rocker, pretty even match, to be honest. The Ravens, I would say at this point, especially with the online league and the way the Rocker have been playing recently, I would definitely say the Ravens are a better team. But Rocker fought them hard. Alex still did look a little bit iffy at times this weekend. I just feel bad for the Rocker overall because I feel like they're just such a good team on LAN and they have such good teamwork and such good fundamentals, but something about this online switch just hasn't benefited them. I don't know if it's connection or if they actually just have gotten worse, but I just feel so bad for them that they fall 3-2 here. I mean, yes, they should be able to beat the teams that they played, but once again, they didn't get the easiest draw. I mean, they played Subliners in the first round, which coming into the tournament we thought was a pretty tough match. Obviously, after the tournament, we see that it definitely was because Subliners were able to win it all. And then London is, I would say, like a 5-6 range team. They're like a top half of the league team, so they're no easy out at all either. So Rocker kind of got a tough draw here, but unfortunate for them, they do fall to London 3-2 to get knocked out. Then in the qualifier, the winners match, we had the finals precursor. We had Huntsmen, Subliners. Huntsmen win at 3-2. They kind of just rolled them. If I remember the series right, they rolled them in the searches. The first 2 days, Huntsmen were like 3-0 in search. They won the match against Ravens and then won both searches against the Subliners, which, I mean, we'll talk about this a little bit later and what I think this means for Huntsmen, but the fact that Huntsmen are winning consistent searches is scary for the rest of the league because Scump and formal teams, especially when they have guys like Arcitys on their team and Prestinni and Envoy, they're always going to be really good at hardpoint and respawn, and they always seem to be a dominant respawn team. But when you see things like Black Ops 3 champs, they couldn't win a search. World War II, they couldn't win a search. They seem to always struggle in search. So if they're hitting their stride here right before champs and going to be a top search team, watch out. The Huntsmen are scary. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then in the knockout match, we had Subliners, Ravens. Subliners handled them decently easy here, 3-1. A lot of the series this weekend, I mean, looking at the top bracket, we had a couple 3-0s, couple 3-1s, and one 3-2. And then we had a couple 3-2s and a bunch of 3-1s in the lower bracket. Recently, we've been having so many 3-2s, but this weekend was a little bit quicker. So then going into the semifinals, we had in the top Ultra, the winner of Group A versus the loser of Group B, which was the Subliners. Subliners handed them a quick 3-0. To be honest, all of Sunday, there's not a whole lot to talk about because it was just quick. That was the word of the day Sunday. I know Maven tweeted out like after it was over, it was like a 3-hour day or something like that. And Maven tweeted out like what happened to the broadcaster. He's just started 45 minutes ago, like as a joke, but that's honestly what it felt like. Sunday went so fast. Subliners 3-0 Ultra, nothing to talk about. Good weekend for Ultra. Obviously, they would have liked to play this match closer and maybe even win it and get to a final to get that extra points and get the sole hold of that 8 seed over Optic. But a good weekend from them overall. Anytime you're like more of considered like a bottom 4 team or like a bottom half of the league team like Ultra and you're able to make it to a semifinal out of your group, I'd consider that a pretty good weekend for them. Obviously, as a player, you're never going to consider it a pretty good weekend because you want to win every time no matter where you are. But I'd say for the caliber of their team and the way they've struggled this year, winning their group is pretty good. But Subliners do win at 3-0 and advance to the finals. And then in the other part, we finally got it. We got Huntsmen versus Faze. They haven't played, obviously they've scrimmed and stuff this year, but they haven't played in an actual tournament or they didn't play at launch weekend. They didn't play in an actual tournament. Nothing happened, which I can't believe they didn't make these 2 play at launch weekend. But I guess you had Scump versus Crim, Hecz versus Hastro, and then you had Scump and Formal versus Optic. So I guess it does make sense, Hecz versus Optic and everything, that they didn't. But it seems like Hecz versus Faze, also Scump versus Faze, Formal versus Faze is like the other big matchup from the AW days. But I can't believe this is the first time we finally got them. It seemed like this tournament was bound to happen because I figured they'd probably both win their groups and then probably both make the finals. I was questionable on Huntsmen winning their group outright because Subliners and Royal Ravens are solid teams. But I mean, Faze with Paris, Toronto, and Gorillas, I figured, oh yeah, Faze is easily coming out as the winner of their group. And then all of a sudden, Faze was the loser of their group, and then Chicago had to play Subliners. I'm like, there's no way. They're both going to lose their groups. They're going to avoid each other, and then one of them will lose in the next round, and they'll avoid each other. But Huntsmen were able to clutch up, and Faze were able to clutch up versus Paris, so they ended up playing in this round, and it didn't go at all as I thought it would. Honestly, I mean, I think I predicted Faze to win 3-1 in the final over Chicago. I thought that Faze was the better team, and I still think they potentially could be. Could have just been a really good series from Huntsmen, and they could have been more fired up for it. But Huntsmen smoked them. I mean, it was a 3-0 clinic. They beat them by like 100 in the hard point, and then I think they smoked them like 6-1, 6-2, 6-3, something like that in the search. Arcitys had a crazy 1v2 on St. Petro on that A-bomb site when he hopped the car and killed Cellium running away. That was a crazy 1v2. They looked dominant in search, and then I think the Dom was a little closer, but they were able to win that 3-0. That was shocking to me. I figured neither team would 3-0. I figured it'd be a 3-1 Faze, maybe a 3-2 Faze. Maybe Huntsmen had a chance to win it 3-2, but Huntsmen looked dominant. After watching this, I figured, New York beat Minnesota, London, and Toronto. Like, good teams, okay teams, but, I mean, Huntsmen had taken down New York, London, an okay team, and then Faze, arguably the best team in the game. So I figured Huntsmen, they just rolled like that. There's no way they lose the final. And then the final came in, Huntsmen got 3-0'd, and they pretty much got smoked. They got beaten the hard point. The search, they got beaten, and then the domination, they got handled pretty easily on the domination. For a second, it looked like they had a chance to make a run in that Hackney Dom, but not really. Subliners were able to handle them pretty easily. So the Subliners win the event. They moved to 3-0, they 3-0 Chicago in the final. A shocker to me. So the Subliners win that event. Not a crazy shock, but you would figure with Faze and Chicago in the event, one of them would probably win it as they've been top teams all year. Subliners have been on the brink, like I said, but they haven't been able to get it done, and finally they do. Good to see. Pretty much locks Subliners up into that top 8, which I think is well-deserved. I think they definitely deserve to be in the top 8. It would have been unfortunate for a team that's looked as good as them recently to be costed by their slow start and not being winners at Champs. But that's going to do it for the quick wrap-up of the tournament. So now we're going to get into like my MVP talks and then power rankings and hot takes and stuff like we always do. So here for the MVP segment, we always go like if you're new to the podcast, we do a winning team MVP. So obviously this has to be from the team that won the tournament, and then we also do a losing team MVP. And I generally say that this losing team MVP has to be from a team that made it to the semifinals, the Final Four. I mean, unless we had like let's say London didn't make it to the semifinals like they did in this tournament, and Wuskin dropped like a 2.0. And they somehow didn't make it, then maybe we'd consider it, but they pretty much have to be from a team that made the semifinal, and most times the team that lost in the final. So my winning team MVP is tough because I can see reasons for really anybody on that team. Zoomaa probably had I think the worst overall KD and stuff on the team, but still he was at like a 1.05 or something like that. But he was just the route man all weekend. He made so many crucial plays in the final with big flanks. I mean, it seemed like every time Huntsman had a chance in that Dom to come back, here was Zoomaa on the flank picking up a 2-piece, or in the hard point, here's Zoomaa on the flank picking up a 2-piece. He went big in the search. I could easily see you saying Zoomaa because of the routes he took and stuff. Not his glory numbers with the KD, but he had crazy routes. Same with Attach. He went big in the S&D. That duo always seems to be like the people that can beat the Scump and formal teams, the optic type teams. They always seem to be the duo that gets it done, especially when they were with Faze. You could maybe give it to Attach. Accuracy played really well on the main AR. I don't like to give it to main ARs as much, but he did play very well on it. I could see a case for him. And then Temp gets his first chip, whether we want to counter it or not. It's a different issue that we won't talk about. But Temp looks really good. He really took over in the finals. He played crazy on that last Dom map. He just looked really good overall, so you could argue him. But I'm going to give it to Mack. No shock there. He had a 1.22 overall KD, a 1.25 in hardpoint, a 0.95 in S&D, and then a 1.27 in domination. Overall, he had the AR in his hand a lot of the weekend. He was just making all the plays. This MVP is more for his versatility, being so good with the sub before this new meta change, and then now being so good with the AR, as well as more of a long-term thing. I mean, before Mack came onto this team and they had 0, they were garbage. I mean, that could just be due to time and learning the game and the other players getting better. But with 0, they were a garbage team. They were a bottom of the barrel. I mean, they were a bottom 3 team before Mack joined the team. And then the second he joined, they showed instant improvement. They made a couple semifinals, and now they make a final and win it all. So this is not only for this weekend, but more of a long term. Like, he just changed this team. And then the losing team MVP was also really tough because I wanted to go maybe 2 or 3 ways. I decided to go with Arcitys. However, I mean, over the other 2, we'll talk about the other 2 that I thought about in a second, but I decided to go with Arcitys because he had a 1.19 overall, a 1.18 in hardpoint, an insane 1.4 in S&D, and Chicago's S&D was like basically undefeated almost on the weekend, besides in that final. And then he had a 1.15 in Dom. I could have gone with Abezy, as he was clearly the best submachine gun player in this tournament to me. And he really, really stood out. But I would say Chicago beating Atlanta Faze 3-0 makes me lean more towards Arcitys. Obviously, Abezy is completely deserving of this losing team MVP if you wanted to give it to him. But Chicago beating them in the semifinal and making it around further also plays a big impact. And Arcitys was just insane. I mean, he's looked a little bit uncomfortable on the map this entire year because, I mean, he's used to being a main AR player, and obviously Formal has the main AR on the team. So Arcitys with an AR this weekend looked a lot more comfortable and as a scary sight. And once again, I don't want to talk too much about Huntsmen because I have a big take to give on them later, but Arcitys looked very good this weekend. He looked a lot more comfortable in that AR. So hopefully the meta stays this way so Arcitys can stay in his more comfortable AR role. And then the other player that had a kind of a crazy event stats-wise, I'd say was Wuskin, but obviously with them not really even getting out of groups, he doesn't really qualify because you kind of have to at least make a semifinal and get your team out of groups to be considered like a most valuable player. But Wuskin had a great weekend. It seems like I say that every time. Wow, Wuskin had a great weekend. If he would have made the semifinal, he could have been MVP of this team maybe. But they don't make it out of groups, so he doesn't really qualify. So Arcitys is the losing team MVP, well-deserved. Like I said, could give it to Abezy. Now we're going to get into my favorite part of doing, one of my favorite parts of doing these post episodes, the power rankings. I also like doing the hot takes, but I really like giving the power rankings out because I know it's controversial and some people are going to disagree. And I have actually a disclaimer for this power rankings. This is the first time all year. Usually when I make a statement on COD, I feel pretty confident in my statement, and even if it's not a statement I feel all that confident in, I like to back it up with just kind of some fake blind confidence and be like, yeah, I think this is going to happen. Speak it into existence, kind of LeVar Ball thing. But this is the first time all year to me that the top 4 or 5 teams actually feels really muddy. And you might really disagree with this one because I'm kind of unsure on it myself. And I'm thinking that this is going to fly around a lot by the time Champs rolls around, especially because, as you guys know, with my power rankings, I don't like to just say, oh, New York won, they've got to be number 2. Just like with Florida, I kept Florida down in like the 4 spot and 3 spot until I saw them get that second win. Then I was like, okay, now they've shown me that it wasn't a fluke and they can do it multiple times. Then I moved Florida up to number 1. Kind of like Faze, I saw them have a couple bad events and I wasn't going to move them down because they were still making finals. And same thing here with New York. If you think New York is a little low, I understand that. But for my power ranking, some people do it based on like completely recency bias. They saw Chicago be trash in their last match of this weekend despite being amazing in all their other matches. And they saw New York be amazing in the final day. New York could easily jump up to like the top spot or right up there, but I want to see one more tournament out of New York here before Champs. I think they only do play in one more, but if they win their next tournament, then definitely they'll jump way up. But I have to keep them down a little bit in this power ranking just because they got 50 points this weekend, and they're still only at 130. So that means going in this weekend, they only had 80 points, or maybe they had 120. I can't remember. 130, I think. So that means before this, they were at 80. That means they had barely won many matches coming into this weekend, really, throughout the whole course of the year. They had played like 8 tournaments and won like 7 matches. They're winning like a match a tournament. So if they go out and they make another semifinal or another final, then yeah, they definitely deserve to be jumped up. But we go a little bit on consistency as well as recency in these power rankings. So the top 4 stayed the same with the 4 teams that were in it, but it did shift around in their order a little bit. I still have to keep Florida at number 1. The most recent time we saw Florida, they had gone back-to-back. I definitely think Florida could drop out of this, though, because Florida was the number one team in the old meta. We don't know how they're going to go in this new meta, although I don't think it'll hurt him too much because you still got Skies, who's a crazy good AR, and then you've got Awakening. He does like to use the AR a lot. He's going to stay very good in that role. And then to me, you've got Pharaoh, who's always been a good flex player who loves to play in the flex role, so he can be that like switch between the third AR and third sub. And then you've still got Havoc playing the sub role. So I think that they're gonna stay very good. I don't think it affects Florida too much. I think that they still stay number one. This meta, like I said, could affect them a little bit. I don't see it affecting them in a crazy way. So they're going to stay number one. I think that they'll still be successful, but with the amount of teams that showed promise this weekend, like New York, Chicago, even Atlanta a little bit, and we haven't seen Dallas in this new meta either, Florida could easily be beat by one of these teams, but we got to keep a number one for now. And then number two, a big shift. I used to have Faze here like every time, but now I'm going to have Chicago here. And you've got to hear me out. This is where I say you can't go completely off recency bias either, because Chicago on day one, they looked good against London. They looked good against New York. They absolutely smoked Faze, which is why I put them ahead of Faze for this power ranking. Now, truthfully, if they were to match up again, I think I'd probably pick Faze again, just because I have more faith in the fact that Faze has been consistent all year. They haven't had as many ups and downs. They consistently have this was the first event that Faze was at that they didn't make the final. So I feel like they have a little bit more consistency in Chicago. I mean, they didn't make it out of groups one tournament. They've made a roster change. They're a little more up and down. So Faze definitely could be ahead of Chicago in your power rankings, but because of how good Chicago's S&D looked this weekend, I think that I have to put them at the 2 spot, and they smoked Faze 3-0. Now you could say, why is New York ahead of them? And once again, it's just because of the fact that Chicago's been a top team for the entire year, and New York has just recently entered the conversation, so Chicago's got to stay ahead of them, and they're number 2. And then at number 3, I have to keep Atlanta Faze there. This is the first tournament, like I said, that they didn't make the final. That's crazy to think about, that they have one tournament left to play in besides champs, and this was the first time that they didn't make the final. That's insane to think about. Like, to be that consistent, I know obviously it's a lot easier to make a final this year than it has been in years past in COD, but to just simply sit down and think that, wow, Faze has been in every final besides this one that they played at, that's crazy. So to me, and their talent, they've got to stay at number 3 for their body of work the whole year. Then number 4, it feels weird because I think I had them at like number 3 in the last power rankings. It feels weird to drop them after not playing, but Empire are here. I think Empire has been getting a little bit worse over the last few weeks. It seems like they've looked a little bit more vulnerable than they did before. And I think this new meta might actually hurt them. I mean, Clay's obviously going to stay on an AR. He's pretty good with it. And then I would assume that Crim has got to be your second AR. It would make sense because Hook's always been an SMG player. Illy, we've only seen him as an SMG, and Shotzi's, we've only seen him as an SMG. So I think this new meta could hurt them. So I could see dropping them below New York. But once again, I can't drop them all the way from 3 to 5. Just for them not playing this weekend. But to me, I mean, who's going to run their third AR? I would probably guess it'd be Illy, because I don't think you take Shotzi with this crazy movement off the MP5, and I don't think you take Hook with his historically great subplay off the MP5. Illy's been the worst of the 3 this year, I think, sub-wise. So maybe you switch him to an AR, because I don't know if I think Illy might have used an AR a little bit in like Black Ops 3 Search and Destroy and stuff. So maybe you put Illy on the AR. I don't know. But to me, you can't drop them too low, seeing as they are 4, but I could see you putting them below New York after New York's strong performance in this new meta. And then 5, no shock here, I've been talking about it for a little bit. I have New York. This is where I had them last time. They could easily make a jump up in your power rankings if you go more on recency bias, but I go, like I said a bunch of times, I go more off how well they've done recently, as well as their body of work. So that's why, like you'll see later, I dropped LA Gorillas a lot because I jumped LA Gorillas a lot based on recency, because towards the bottom you can get jumped on recency because the bottom is just a bunch of bad teams and it's more off who's hot right now. But in the top, it's more about who's hot right now and a lot of consistency. So New York's at 5. I could easily see you putting them ahead of Empire. That's about as high as I go with them, is 4. Now, if they come out in their next event and they win it again, then yeah, it's time to talk about putting them at 3 or at 2. And depending how Florida does, maybe at 1. But for me, Subliners is 5, and it's the end of tier 1 right there. So usually I do like a tier list. 1 through 5 to me is the tier 1. Now we've got 5 teams in that tier 1. I think any of these 5 teams at any given time could probably win an event. And then at 6, this is where there's a decent drop-off, I think. I think we're finally getting to the point in the year where there's a clear difference between who the top teams are and who the more middle-of-the-pack teams are. It's always kind of been like, I thought New York, London, and OGLA for a while they were kind of like fringe event winners. Now it kind of cuts off pretty clearly, and then London starts the tier 2 at number 6. Once again, they seem to have all the tough matchups. They got beat out by the Chicago and New York in this tournament, and those were the 2 teams that played in the finals, so London kind of got a bad draw again. I still think they have potential to win an event or to make consistent semifinals if they get the right matchups. The problem is that's why they're number 6, is if they get the right matchups. They can't seem to beat any of the top 5 teams, but they always seem to be able to beat the teams that are below them, so that's why they're number 6. And then at number 7, they jumped a little bit here. I have Toronto. Like I said, the bottom is a little bit more based on recency bias. And, I mean, Paris hasn't looked good all year. Gorillas looked horrible this weekend. Minnesota's looked horrible recently. Surge we haven't seen in a while, but they haven't looked that great. And then OGLA made a roster change, and the last time we saw them, they were abysmal. So Toronto's got to go ahead of all those teams. They looked great this weekend. Then the semifinal, they kind of laid an egg. But I feel like with this new roster that they have, the more time they get to mesh, the better they're going to be. So they're at 7 to me, and they're still in that tier 2. And then rounding out the tier 2, to me, is OGLA. I think that, like I always say, like Slasher, Kenny, TJ, those 3 are on a team at any point that can win an event. And then they picked up Draza and Hollow or whatever. And I don't really know anything about those guys, but I think I heard both of them are pretty good with an AR. And then obviously you're going to keep Kenny and TJ on your subs. And I think OGLA, I mean, any team with those 3 players is always going to have a chance to win an event. That's why I put them at 8 over all the other teams. And I think that's the end of the tier 2 for me. Those are the teams that are like fringe. If something crazy happens, they could win an event. Even though Toronto's ahead of them, I think OGLA has more chance to win an event. But Toronto a little bit more recently successful, so they go ahead of OGLA. Then at 9, we've got the Surge. This might be a little weird to you, having them ahead of Minnesota and LAG, but to me, I feel like Pander, maybe full-time on the AR, might help him a little bit, and then maybe if Slack gets an AR in his hands as the 3rd AR flex-type player, that could help him out. Then with Apathy and Proto being just crazy fast in front of Octane, that could even open up the map a little bit more. So I think they have somewhat potential here at the start of Tier 3. Like super outside potential to win an event, but maybe decent potential to get out of their group or something. Then at 10, we've got Minnesota. Once again, like I always say, I feel bad for them, but they're another team that I feel like has crazy long shot odds to somehow win an event. But I feel like it's possible if they get hot on a weekend to maybe have them get out of their group or something like that. So they're the round out of Tier 3. And then Tier 4, the bottom 2 teams, they're back in their spots. 11 is LA Gorillas. It seems like that last weekend was a fluke. I still put them in like that. I mean, they're Tier 4, so I don't really think they can win an event, but I still put them as a team that I could maybe see making it out of their group somehow. Once again, if they come out and they're absolutely lights out in S&D, because if they just never lose an S&D, they're a team with enough talent to maybe sneak out a respawn, so that's why I have them ahead of Paris. Paris showed a little bit more promise. Obviously, Paris 3-0 at LAG, so you could put them ahead of them, but to me, I just think that if they play probably like 6-7 times out of 10, I think Gorillas will beat Paris. So I have them ahead of Paris, but I could see you flip-flopping those teams. To be honest, it doesn't matter because neither of them are really going to make any noise, I don't think. Then lastly, we're going to get into some takeaways and kind of hot takes from the event. This video is already going really long. I think we're almost at like 40 minutes, so I don't want to get too much more into it because I don't want to make you guys have to watch such a long video when you're here. But we'll get into some of the takeaways and a little bit of bonus news. The first thing is, I guess Champs is rumored to be the 29th and 30th in August. I'm assuming that's a Friday, Saturday, or a Saturday, Sunday, obviously. I guess that was shown on stream. Obviously an accident. They wouldn't just randomly just show that on stream for a second and like leak it that way. They obviously are probably going to do like some big reveal event for the dates once the standings are probably set or something. But I guess it seems like the 29th and 30th of August are the dates for Champs. And then my first hot take, if you want to call it that, isn't really hot at all. It's just more of a normal take that I'm sure a lot of you have. But I think that New York has finally arrived to that potential I've been talking about. And I think I hit the nail on the head in the last post show. In the last post show, my hot take on New York was that they had taken that OGLA spot in my mind. That team that was like a fringe, super talented team that could easily win an event if anything went right at the right time. And I mean, I got that spot on. I said I think their ceiling's higher than OGLA too, just because they seem a little bit more consistent, and I was spot on. They ended up being that fringe team, and they won the event. And I think with continued success to close out the year, I could see them jumping teams like Dallas and Chicago in our minds. because Chicago's been a little bit inconsistent and up and down, and Dallas seems to be a little up and down. And with this new meta, I don't know how Dallas will do. So I could see New York with a little bit more consistency in their next event. Ahead of champs, I could see them maybe becoming like the third best team, or like where we put them at 3 in the power rankings or something. Then another take I have is this new meta came at like the worst time for so many players. Obviously, for certain teams, it came at the best time because they got better. But for individual players, it seems like this meta came out at the worst time. If it would have came out 2 months earlier, it could have done so much for so many players. Just to touch on a few, Dashy and Chino would have been ARs with, like, let's say 2 months ago, before, like, right, if it would have happened like right after they benched JCap for Chino, then the 3 AR meta, you could have had Dashy as a full-time AR with Slasher, and then Chino as your flex, because Dashy just wants to run the AR all the time. Then you'd have Dashy, Slasher, and Chino as your 3 ARs on the map. That'd be insane. I mean, Chino was a top AR in World War II. He's always been a good AR. Slasher's obviously been like a top 3 AR for how many years? And since he came on the scene, Dashy's been a top AR too. Those 3 running on the map with an AR would be insane. And then Kenny's been one of the best subs since World War II, and so is TJ. So those 2 pushing in front of them with subs, I think that team would be absolutely nuts. I think that obviously they had the vibes issues, but if 2 months ago the meta would have changed and they would have started winning, I think the vibes would have been fixed pretty quick if they would have started winning. I think they would have been disgusting in this meta, like bad vibes. They would have been reminiscent of 100T in a way, I think, because I mean, you'd have a dominant main AR. 100T had that with Octane. Slasher's been arguably like one of the best main ARs, dominant this year. And then if you want to consider like your 2 ARs, like your flex type players, your other 2 ARs, like it's not the same thing, obviously same role, but like they had Slasher and like Priestahh on the 2 or Slasher and Kenny on the 2 Maddoxes mostly. And then in your 2 ARs you'd have Dashy, who kind of would rival like a Slasher type role, and then obviously I would say that Kenny is better than Chino, but Chino is a good AR, so he'd be able to somewhat replicate it. And then you'd have Kenny on the SMG flex type role, kind of matching that Priestahh role from last year. And then on your entry sub, you'd have TJ versus Enable, and I think TJ is probably a better player than Enable, so they would have been reminiscent of 100T in a way, and wow, would they have been good. And winning would have fixed their issues, I think. And then Karma may not have retired if this meta would have came earlier. Think about it. I mean, that's crazy to think about and really sad to think about, because obviously I don't think there's a single person out there that's in the COD community that doesn't want Karma back. We want Karma back playing. He's an entertaining guy. He's super popular. He's just good for the scene to have a guy that's that popular and just likable like him. He may not have retired, because he said like one of the main things why he retired, obviously he didn't like the game, but he also just said he wasn't really having fun anymore, and he just has wanted to be a main AR for the last how many years. And while technically he wouldn't have been the main AR on this team because it still would have been Octane, he definitely would have been the first guy switched to AR. It would have been Octane as the main, and then Karma as the other permanent AR, and then Pander would have been the third AR/flex, and then you would have had Slacked and Apathy on the subs. So maybe Karma wouldn't have retired if this meta happened earlier. And then Gunless may not have been benched, because if Gunless was able to use a third AR on the team, obviously Arcitys and Formal would still be using the AR over him, and then Envoy and Scump would be on the subs, and then Gunless would have been like that third AR/sub if he ever had to use the sub. And they may have been a lot better. They may have been dominant. They might have won like every event with that crazy good team. And then maybe he wouldn't have been benched, because like I said, whenever you're winning, it seems like vibes get fixed. And the issue with that team was vibes. So maybe they would have stuck together. And the next take I have, this isn't really much of a take. It's just like another little bit of news I actually kind of just saw while doing this. I saw that Scraps said that the 10mm like bullets or mag or whatever on the MP5 might be back in. He said there was some people were complaining about it not being in, that they couldn't hang without it. So I'll be interested if this does shift the meta back, if it happens. Seeing the power of more players having an M4 this weekend, I don't know how much it'll change, but I do think we kind of need a stronger sub somehow. It seemed like the MP5 players, apart from like a couple of them, were just getting bullied this weekend by having so many M4s on the map. Now I don't know if the solution is the 10mm and if the MP5 is super OP again, because I don't want to go back to that old meta, but I do think that the MP5 being a little bit stronger could help a little bit to make it a little more balanced, because I mean, let's face it, AR players were dominating this past weekend and sub players really struggled. And then the last pro take I want to talk about is Chicago. This is the one I really wanted to get to, and why I said we weren't going to talk a ton about some of the other stuff I saw is there's a lot to talk about here with Chicago, and takes always have to be given on this team because obviously they're the most popular team, so there's always a lot to talk about. The main thing here is Scump. Scump had a 0.85 this weekend. He was bad in respawns, but he had a 1.0 in search. He's been good at search all year. Now, if you don't think, or if you think Scump is going to stay that low for that long, you haven't been watching COD this guy's whole career. I mean, he's been playing for like 10 freaking years. The only time he's ever struggled like a 0.85 or worse is like the end of World War II, and that was just completely different circumstances. He had the bad internet, couldn't really practice. The team was didn't have faith in each other because of the role issues and stuff. But honestly, a 0.85 is pretty normal for some subs. I think Prestinni had like a 0.85 in event ago, and everybody was calling him nasty. But that's not even horrendous. But the standard Scump has established for himself, a 0.85 is very low. Because I mean, back when he was like with Nadeshot and that, if he wasn't dropping a 1.3, he'd drop like a 1.22, and people will call him trash because he didn't drop a 1.3. Like a 1.22 is insane for anybody. It's kind of like the new standard. Like it's what Simp has over his head. Unfortunately, now it's like Simp dropped like a 1.1 a few events ago, and 1.1 is still so good, and people were like, well, I'm used to Simp dropping a 1.35. How is he dropping a 1.1? He's trash. So like Scump's got this standard where if he's not dropping a 1.11 or a 1.1 plus or 1.2 plus, people are like, oh, he's trash, he's garbage. We're like, at this point in his career, Scump's been playing for 10 years. The dude can't drop a 1.3 forever. If he drops like a 1, I think like on the year so far, he's got like a 1. He's got like a 1.08 a lot of events. That's still pretty good. And here's the thing. I think that Scump actually playing bad this weekend like he did, I think it almost shows it's like a good thing for Huntsmen. Obviously, if he would have played better and they would have wanted to be better, but I think it almost shows like Huntsmen has more potential than we might have even thought they had, because everyone on the team played good. Formal was great. He had like a 1.1. He was great as always. Arcitys was my losing team MVP. He had like a 1.2 overall. He looked great. Envoy had a 0.96. He looked really good, as he always does. Prestinni looked really good with a 0.96, and he showed crazy signs of potential. I mean, he went on that 14 streak with the AR. He looked like he could be a really good, solid third AR. And if anything doesn't work out, they've always got Gunless on the bench as the third AR. And honestly, if you think Scump's going to stay down that long, he usually always comes to his best form. Obviously, apart from World War II, I mean, at Black Ops 2 champs, he went crazy. At Ghost champs, he went crazy. AW champs, he went crazy. BO3 champs, he went crazy. IW champs, he played really well, and they won it. Obviously, World War II is different. And then BO4 champs, my God, the guy was going off on Sunday. If they would have ended up winning that event, he might have been MVP because of how well he was playing on Sunday. So I think that he's going to get into form, and the other 4 looked great this weekend. So if Scump even gets into like half his normal form or like decently close to his normal form, they might be the best team in the game. So I think that Scump playing not as well actually shows Chicago's insane potential, because they made it to a final with him playing like that. Then lastly, a little bit of amateur news. We got to talk about it because he's like one of the most popular players. He's got like the most, I think he has more followers than Scump. He's got the most followers in the entire league on Twitter, and he's a bench player, Censor. He got picked up by a top AM team called Triumph Gaming, I believe it is. And that team includes, I mean, pretty established pro players. Nagafen, who's like almost my favorite player. Fellow, another established player that played with Naga on Elevate. And then Royalty, who was first came into the scene on that 100T team in the league, and then played for like EG last year. And somebody else, I can't remember, he played for Lightning Pandas back in like World War II. Pretty established, a very good player. And then Standy, who's like a new 18 or 19-year-old. I knew nothing about him coming into this year, but he's pretty good. He's actually disgusting. He was like the best player. I watched pretty much all of Fellow's stream this weekend while watching the CDL stream, and they looked actually really good. Like I said, Standy is disgusting. I think we might have to include him in the video when I talk about the potential like 20 players that could be on the expansion teams if there are 4 next year. He's disgusting. But Doug looked really solid, and for almost no practice, top 4 is pretty good for that team. Although Doug did kind of sell the team in the elimination game 5 for top 3. He went 1-9. But I really hope that team can win Challenger Champs, just so the community can go nuts. It would bring a lot of attention to Challenger Champs. If Doug's in the final, it'd actually get a lot of viewers just because of the crazy fan base he brings. But also because I love Naga, and I like Fellow a lot and Royalty, and I want to see them get back in the league. So that's going to do it for this episode, I think. I hope you guys enjoyed listening, because I loved talking through this one, especially. That's why we went like 50 minutes or something on this video. But please be sure to subscribe, if I can get the word out, and then turn on notifications so you know when the videos go live and you can give your reactions to them. Drop a like if you guys enjoyed this one, and most importantly, be sure to comment your thoughts on the podcast and your own takes. Would you switch around the power rankings? I wouldn't be shocked if you did, because like I said, these are the ones I'm most unsure about. Give me your own takes. Is there something that you kind of took away from this weekend that I didn't mention, that I missed? Also, comment down below, should I start that dedicated Twitter for the podcast so you guys could tweet me questions, or we could talk in a much easier format during the matches? Yeah, just comment down below your thoughts, like I said, and talk to me about the Twitter thing. Maybe I'll get it started after this video or something. But thank you guys for watching. I'll possibly see you tomorrow or within the next few days to do the pre-London podcast that we've got to do, because that's coming up pretty quick here. So I will probably see you guys in the next day or two with that one. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Like I said, leave those comments down below. Like, comment, and subscribe for more. Hope you guys enjoyed watching this past weekend. Kind of a fast Sunday, like I said, but it was an overall good event. So thank you guys for watching this podcast, and I will see you in the next couple days for the pre-London show.